But first tonight, though, heightened security in Hong Kong as police prepare for more demonstrations against the government's controversial extradition bill. The force will deploy 5,000 officers outside the Legislative Council and central government offices tonight. Protesters are expected to hold a rally outside LegCo this evening ahead of tomorrow morning's debate. An online petition has called for 50,000 people to surround the area at 10 p.m. Now, there have also been growing calls for a citywide strike. Unions and welfare groups have urged businesses to close so that their staff can join the rally, while hundreds of aviation workers are urging airline employees to call for a formal strike in protest to the bill. Now, the Hong Kong Professional Teachers Union, they called on members to protest as well. It asked that schools be understanding of students who choose to cut classes to join the rally. Student unions at 7 local universities intend to boycott classes tomorrow to join the protest. Now, the students expressed anger at the Hong Kong government and said that they plan to escalate their action. Meanwhile, a bus company's staff union has urged all members to drive at slow speeds of between 20 and 25 kilometers per hour tomorrow in protest of the extradition law. Now, this adds to the hundreds of businesses, shops and restaurants that have announced plans to strike tomorrow while lawmakers scrutinize the bill. This morning, Hong Kong's Chief Executive Carrie Lam warned against such action.
咁所以我喺呢度都係呼籲，無論係學校、家長或者係一啲機構、企業、工會都要認真考慮佢哋如果係鼓吹呢啲咁嘅激烈嘅行為，對於香港社會有啲咩好處？
And our correspondent Lynette Lim is outside LegCo where protesters are gathering right now. Lynette, give us a sense, what's the atmosphere like where you are right now?
Where I am is actually very peaceful. The protesters here come from a religious group. They're Christian, they're going through some proverbs and chants right now. But earlier they were playing Christian worship songs. The mood is very calm and orderly. There were even some children and elderly people in the crowd. In spite of the large and visible police presence, there hasn't been any chaos or any trouble so far. A lot of the people here really braved the rain. There was a heavy thunderstorm just a couple of hours ago, right before peak hour traffic. So that would have caused a dampener. But at last count, I did a rough estimate, and I think there are more than 100 people here. As the crowds grew and umbrellas grew behind me, I'm standing on a ladder here, so it's a bit hard for me to constantly keep track.
Lynette, around 100 people there now, but how big is this crowd expected to grow to over the course of the night?
Numbers are a bit hard to pin down, and earlier, like Glenda said, there was one petition calling for 50,000 people to come and come here to the LegCo. Many of the groups are actually very discreet and very dispersed, so there isn't really one core leader or one core group behind these gatherings. Some of them are religious groups, some of them are civil rights groups. So I think the nature of the groups make it hard for people to keep track of activities. Of course, there are also what the Hong Kong police call the armed radicals or the mob, and I gained access to one of the encrypted messaging platforms. So there are so many of these messages floating around, but sometimes some of the timings that we can look out for would be 10 p.m. where there have been messages calling for people to storm the LegCo, 12 midnight where messages indicate that we could expect possibly an escalation of violence, and then obviously in the early hours of the morning before the bill is to be debated in the LegCo, this will continue overnight into 11 a.m. on Wednesday.
All right, Lynette, thank you very much for that update. Lynette Lim there reporting for us in Hong Kong. Let's go now to Roland Lim, who's standing inside the Legislative Council complex. Roland, what can we expect from tomorrow's LegCo proceedings?
Good evening, Don. Yes, I just wanted to point out I'm in the LegCo building, but outside me is actually the protest area where on Monday early morning protesters and police had their skirmishes, and that's why the protest zone, the public protest zone, has been off limits to protesters this time around. Police are not taking any chances. What are we expecting tomorrow? Well, the Legislative Council President, Andrew Leung, has said that he has penciled in 66 hours for debate on the extradition bill. This means that for the weekdays ahead, the bill will be under discussion, and the earliest that lawmakers here can vote on that bill is likely to be next Thursday, that's June the 20th. Now, the LegCo Secretariat says that it has received some 258 committee stage amendments, mostly from 22 lawmakers, as well as one government request. Half of those amendments were actually put forward by the pan-democratic camp in a bid to filibuster the vote. But remember, filibustering rules are in place. For example, there is a time limit on the questions asked. Lawmakers cannot repeat themselves, and they must stay on topic. At the end of the day, though, filibustering may not work because, remember, Chief Executive Carrie Lam has enough votes in the Legislative Council to pass the vote through. A simple majority of 35 lawmakers out of 70 lawmakers in LegCo is needed to pass the bill. And remember, LegCo currently made up of a majority of pro-Beijing stalwarts after some opposition lawmakers were actually kicked out of office.
All right, Roland, you said that, that there aren't measures in place to stop filibustering, but at this point, any chance that the bill can perhaps be maybe stopped?
Well, chances right now are slim, and that's why the opposition camps are calling for this mass rally. They're hoping that the 50,000 strong may actually put pressure on the government or on the lawmakers here who answer to their constituents to change their minds about the voting of this particular bill. But remember, if the government decides to railroad through this bill, it will come at a price. The greater damage will be to, of course, Hong Kong's judiciary. That's one of the key planks of the Hong Kong's strengths. The amendments to the extradition bill will weaken the territory's judicial system, its autonomy here. It will make locals as well as foreigners in Hong Kong subject to mainland Chinese law. Many here fear, and that's why there was that million-strong march, many here fear that they will not get a fair trial in China, that the judicial system in China cannot be trusted, as well as poor human rights record. And don't forget, the Chinese judiciary has a 99% conviction rate. Now, the other fallout would be, of course, the failure of the government and the pro-Beijing lawmakers to heed the call of the million-strong march on Sunday would mean that it will reinforce the perception that the LegCo as well as the chief executive take their marching orders from Beijing. And this is likely to further depress upcoming Legislative Council elections as well as calls for future boycotts of elections here in Hong Kong.